Everybody, and welcome to the winter driving webinar with us at Octopus Electric Vehicles. You join me, Charlie. I've just driven up the road from London to Glasgow yesterday. I'm now in a small seaside town in Scotland. And I'm going to chat us through everything we need to know to get up to speed with driving in the winter, how to make sure your car is prepped and ready and all good to go. I've just had a message from our secret squirrel that you can absolutely hear me. So we'd love to hear your questions. Please drop them into the chat panel. We can then see them a little bit later, work out what's going on, and get some of those questions answered at the end. While I'm chatting, I'm going to struggle to see all of them, but I will go through them at the end. And anything we don't have time for today, we're going to collate and get sorted. So a couple of bits and bobs that we suppose we need to go through today is thank you first for joining. We wouldn't be able to do this without you joining to have a chat. Second up, this is here to help you get the most out of your electric car. So any questions you do have are absolutely warranted. Please ask them in the chat panel and we'll do our best to get them sorted on the call. We're going to cover off some topics today. There's going to be really three main topics that we're going to cover. But if you want us to go off and delve into a little bit deeper into something else, absolutely, we can do that. I'm going to load up our presentation. And also last time, there's a little bit of feedback that you couldn't quite see the presentation. So I've changed the way that this works. So if long as we get this right now, there we go. Fantastic. It's like I'd practiced and everything, right? So we're going to chat through cold weather driving in your EV. I think for lots of people, cold weather driving makes them think of the World Rally Championship in the middle of Sweden in roads like this. And actually, the vast majority of our driving won't be like this. The vast majority of our driving will be on cold, wet, especially in the UK, in cold, wet weather. And that's where really we need to do an awful lot of work to make sure we are working as hard as possible to get the most out of our car. Now, there are some things that are real positives about your electric car that mean in the cold weather, it can suffer a little bit if you don't prep the right way. What are those? And people always bring it up. The batteries aren't going to go far in the cold. The rain slows the car down. And what happens if I run out of charge in the cold? So we're going to cover off all of those to get you covered today. First up, we're going to talk a little bit on these three main topics. So first up, prepping your car. Second up, charging your car. So how do we make sure that charging is all relative and right for the weather that we're going to be in? And finally, driving your car. I don't want to teach you to suck eggs. So if I'm telling you anything that you already know or want to cover off, we'll get that sorted. But first up, I mentioned about driving in the cold and how the batteries can maybe struggle with that. The batteries in all electric cars nowadays are super efficient and actually really strong in cold weather. We'll come on to what we can do to heat them up. We'll also come on to what we can do to make sure we're getting the most out of them. However, because your car is more efficient, what will happen is that it will use a little bit more power in the cold weather. So please be aware of that. Please be ready for that. We're going to teach you how to cover off and get the most out of it otherwise. So first up, prepping your car. What are we going to do? Well, this is all about tires. This is all about the contact patch hitting the road. There are a few things to go through here. So first up, making sure that your tires are in good working condition, ready to push all of that water out from underneath them. There are a couple of photos here. This is one of my old tires, which was very close to being on the legal limit, which is on the left-hand side. And here's a slightly newer tire. It's probably done about 4,000 or 5,000 miles. What you'll see is, contrary to popular belief, actually, it's not the grooves that give you grip in dry conditions. If you think about racing cars, they have smooth tires, they have slicks. Actually, it's the rubber touching the road that gives you grip. The bit that you need to remember is that if you imagine grabbing a rubber and pushing it on a pencil, that's really quite tough, or two rubbers together, it's really tough. But as soon as you add water into that mix, a little bit of moisture, those rubbers become really slidey. What the grooves in our tire actually do is they let the water escape from underneath the contact patch. And if your tires have not got a good enough groove in them, then that water won't escape, or that snow won't escape either. That's why in racing conditions, rally cars in tarmac run really wide tyres. Then when they go to the snowy mountains, they run really, really narrow tyres. So it's really important to make sure of this. You can do a nice quick check. So it's a little bit, if you've on your phone, it might be a little bit trickier to see, but on the screen in front of you, on the right-hand side, on the slightly better tyre, you'll see there's a groove that sits horizontal across the tyre. That's your tyre wear marker. You can run your finger around and feel that. If there's still a lip between that and the groove, then you're good. You've still got enough, you've got enough channeling for that water to come out. If you're like the car on the left-hand side, you'll see there's not really much of a lip now between that tyre wear marker and the rest of the tyre. You need to go get yourself some new tyres. But of course, on our system, the way that you get your tyres is through your driver line. So you phone up, press the tyre option, book in, get you sorted. We'll all get you good as well. It's really important to keep an eye out on these, because not only is it for your safety, it's also for your range. So I know this sounds really strange, but in the wet, your electric car will use a little bit more electricity because it's pushing the weight of the water away. If there's nowhere for that water to go, it starts to build up and it starts to create almost like a bow wave at the front of the wheel. And that starts to draw the car back even more. A little bit like aerodynamics, except with water. So what we do is, if you've got a good groove in the tyre, the water can get into that groove and escape out from underneath. And also you're no longer pushing that water along. And that's really important. The other thing that really helps with this is the pressure in your tyres. So we need to be really, really aware of our pressures. Now, you'll notice the weather's got a little bit colder recently. And because pressure is a movable thing, it's relative to the pressure outside. When the temperature drops, the temperature in your tyre will also drop as well. So right now is a perfect time to get out, get pumping those tyres back up to exactly where they should be, and making sure you're getting the most out of them. A lot of cars, if you open the door, the tyre pressures will be on a plaque on the side there. Also, underneath your charging flap, or traditionally with a petrol cap, that's where you would find the best pressures for your car. You'll also find written around the side, you'll find the top pressure the tyre can go to. We wouldn't suggest going all the way there, but that's an easy way to know if you're too high. One thing with these pressures is, if you get them right and you can keep them nice, fairly high within their recommended range, you're going to crown the tyre. Now, what we're asking you to do here is not actually to crown the tyre properly. That will create excess wear at the contact patch. We don't want you to do that. But what we also don't want, also for looking after your tyres, also for the rainy conditions, but also for your range, we don't want the tyre sitting squat on the road. So if you imagine, I'm trying to draw it with my hands, but if the tyre is underinflated, more of the tyre is going to press into the road, and that's not great. If we can get more pressure in, we have the right amount of tyre pressing the road, it reduces the rolling resistance, it gives the water and the snow somewhere to go, and you'll get that range out of that car as well. Hopefully that all makes sense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just drop into the chat panel and make sure that we're all good at the moment, just in case it is in here. Tim says one major point is winter mode in his Ioniq 5. What is the benefits of this, and when will we use it? We'll come to that at the end. Does my EV have a small 12-volt battery from Simon, and what's it actually used for? We'll come on that in the end as well. Daniel, talking about the EVs, especially in the snow due to extra traction provided. We'll have a chat about that, and about how they're not prone to sliding or prone to sliding. And from Haydock, should we look to fit winter tyres on Octopus EVs in the UK, and can an EV be pushed to help internal traction in snowy conditions, especially rear-wheel drive such as BMW? We'll come on to all of those at the end, absolutely. They're brilliant questions, actually. I gave you a sneak peek at the next slide. So what else can we do? This doesn't actually help us with range, but it's the things that while you're doing all your winter checks, what should we really be doing anyway? Well, that should be in your driver pack. You will find some tabs, some little tablets. they are to go into your washer fluid. Make sure that's always topped up and make sure those tabs are in there as well. The tabs that we provide should go down to -5 degrees centigrade. However, or Celsius, what you should do is if you're worried, if you're living a little bit further north than I am right now, what you want to do is make sure that you're adding a little bit more anti the stuff that makes sure that that water doesn't freeze, because that's a problem if it's in the pipes. The next thing is make sure you've got lovely, clean, smooth wipers. And again, like your tires, we get those sorted for you. So if you are having issues with your wipers, give us a phone. I did get the options sent through to me. I'll pop them in the chat panel at the end so that you can see. And then finally, we don't give you this, but it's a little bit of a recommendation, hopefully in true Blue Peter fashion. I'm sure there are other brands out there like Rain-X. However, I used it on my race. I use it on my road car, on my race helmet, and on other bits and bobs of my car, lights as well. They now do this 2-in-1 glass cleaner. It's utterly fantastic. If you've never used Rain-X before, what it does is it creates a hydrophobic layer on the top of the glass. And what that means is that when water hits it, it balls up, and at a certain speed, I think it's about 40 miles an hour, the water is pushed off by the air flying, moving over the car. So actually what ends up happening is that your window wipers are only there to clear the big pools or if you have a smudge, whereas the Rain-X lets the water roll off. I'm just back from driving my car, my electric car, to the south to Sicily, and every couple of stops, Rain-X. The treatment is really good. It lasts a long time. This glass cleaner is fantastic. Absolutely, if you can, try and find it, try and get it on your windscreen, on your mirrors. It's utterly fantastic. I would recommend that completely. But other brands should be available. But in these conditions, again, it's not going to help your range. That's what your tire pressures are for. However, and getting the right tires. However, making sure that you are able to see makes a big difference when we come on to talking about the driving that we do and how we help you there as well. So what's next? We're going to talk about charging your car. So for a lot of people, charging at home is the main way that you charge your car, and that's going to be the best way to combat all of these snowy, cold conditions. And another thing that gets said, obviously, is that when I charge my electric car in the cold, I see my range drop considerably. So there's a couple of things going on there. The car might be really clever and be sensing the temperature and changing the amount of range that's going on. The car might not be keeping the battery at a nominal temperature to try and save some energy. So once the car's heated up a little bit more, you'll find that that battery range gets bigger. That's from something called heat sinking. So a longer journey while the car's warm, what you're going to find is you're going to get more range than if you just do little stop start, letting it heat up, letting it cool down again. So that's something to bear in mind. If you do a long drive like I did last night, and then do a really short drive, what you might find is that on the longer drive, the car is predicting it will go further. That is actually the case. It's that once that battery is heated up a bit, it gives you a little bit more range. So on that note, around batteries heating up, what can we do to combat that? So one of the best ways we can do that, and I can do it from my phone right now, is I can go into my BMW app for my car, and I can heat my car. Now, if your car is parked in the middle of nowhere and it's not on a charger, it's probably not best to do that. You are going to use a little bit of energy to do that. But if the car is plugged in, the car, for the most part, is going to pull the energy from the wall, not from the batteries. So while you're at home and you're ready to get up in the morning, while you're having your first cup of coffee, set the car to heat up. Because if you can do that, it's going to defrost itself. I'm the envy of all of my neighbors when I do that. It's going to defrost itself. But what it's also going to do is it's going to heat the batteries to make sure that the batteries are in their nominal working temperature for when you hit the road. That will give you more range overall. I do it even at rapid chargers as well. If I'm on a long journey, What I'll do is when I roll up to the charger, I'll plug it in, I'll go for my coffee, and as I go for my coffee, I'll tap the button to keep my car at the right temperature. What the car is then doing, I was saying about heat sinking, will pull heat from the inverter, from the charging unit, from the batteries, and from the motors to heat the cabin. And then when it does that, it's not using extra power to do so. Different manufacturers do this in different ways. So some cars are a little bit better than others. If you've got a heat pump on your car, it's fantastic. If you've got a Porsche, it's pulled its system from its 919 race car, which was all about diverting heat and moving it around, just flipping it rather than trying to keep it cool, warming the Taycan up. But there are lots of clever things the car is doing in the background. If you tell the car what you're going to do with it, it's going to try and make the best possible case for itself to get as far as it goes. If you do what you would traditionally do with your petrol car, which is just rock up, put the keys in, turn the heater all the way up before the engine's warmed up, what you'll find is that actually most people don't realize that you're using an awful lot of fuel there and your miles per gallon drops significantly in the cold weather. We can beat all of that by heating the car up before we get into it. And that makes a huge difference for us. The next stage is, of course, long distance driving and the Electroverse. And I've got a hot off the press piece of information to share with you. If you've been to the last webinar, you'll know how to use the Electroverse. And I'm going to go in and do a very, very quick live demo of it so you can see. However, the amazing piece of news about the Electroverse is that we've now turned on, after some testing, the ambient weather conditions. So right now, when you're on the Electroverse and you're in the map like this, and you go into the route planner and it shows you your car here, what you're going to end up seeing is actually, if I route from where I am just now, please nobody come and knock on the door if you're local. That's it. And I route to our London office. In fact, let's route to our Weybridge office. Weybridge. There we go. We click on that. And I'm going to use Electroverse only and calculate route. That's going to take us there. But right now, it's going to calculate how my car will cope in those weather conditions, which is utterly brilliant. So if you are going long distance, start going into your Electroverse app or on your computer before you go. The beautiful thing about the app is that you can set the journey on your phone and then send it to Google Maps or Apple Maps while you're in the app, rather than having to faff around with anything up here on the screen. But just know that if it's saying you're going to be able to do this X to Y, it's, or A to B, that's better, isn't it? It's absolutely going to be able to do that. And if it is colder in certain places, the car or the system will know that and will make strategic decisions differently for you. You don't have to. On the last presentation, it wasn't turned on, and I was suggesting in the cold weather, you knock down the range a little bit, just so that you've got a little bit of extra room. But for this, now, if you're worried about the cold or about the wet, Electroverse is going to start not predicting that for you, but taking the ambient weather conditions right now and predicting how far the car is going to go. So absolutely keep an eye out for this. It should be live already. Have a play. Obviously, you can't change the conditions on the screen at the time, but as we get colder, just trust that this is going to work for us. If you have any questions about it, pop them in the chat panel or let us know. We can absolutely get that sorted for you, or get you speaking to the guys that have built this so you understand what is going on. Hopefully that all is clear as mud and we're all good to go on the Electroverse. But yeah, you can check out our other webinar, which is on our YouTube channel, all about how to use the Electroverse to help you get further. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about driving. So how do we get the most out of our car in terms of driving? Well, very, very similar to everything else you've ever done to get as much range out of the car as possible. I've taken cars to the Arctic Circle, electric. Please, I've been in the I've been in the electric car game so long now. When I talk about just cars, I always mean electric cars. But I've taken 4 EVs to the Arctic Circle. I've taken 10 across the desert in the Middle East, and actually, long range driving stays the same the entire way. Just what affects it changes a little bit. So the things you want to be uh, take super care of are things like you want to coast as much as possible when you're trying to go long distance. You want to use the brake as least as possible, but I don't mean not slow the car down. I mean be much more considerate about when you're getting on the throttle so that you don't have to use the brake for other things. Obviously, you would always use the brake in an emergency. You're going to slow those hands right the way down. If we can get little inputs, slow inputs, that really helps us to get into the corner and out the corner using as little grip as possible. I know that sounds weird, but we want to use as little, we want to change the car's trajectory as little as possible through the corner to make a difference there. And then in really snowy conditions, what we want to start doing is getting it into regen mode no matter what. Regen, as long as you've got like creep or roll turned on, should never lock the wheels. And that's one of the big issues that you have with old school mechanical brakes. So what happens is that when you press the brake pedal, fluid is pressed from the master cylinder, which is impacted by your braking. And that gets sent out to the wheels along pipes. That's why like brake lines can be cut in gangster movies. And that brake, the fluid goes out to the brakes, and then when you press the brake, a caliper pushes pads onto the spinning disc on the inside. Now the problem is that if you run out of grip, when you close that caliper, that those wheels stop completely because they're not being pushed along with momentum. And in snow and ice, this happens more. With your regenerative braking, also known as recuperation, one pedal driving in the Polestar 2, e-pedal in the Nissan Leaf. In German cars, it might have a B. So like my car goes from D to B when I flick it into full regen mode. That's actually the motor trying to collect energy off of the stator or off of the motor. So what happens is your motor switches polarity and becomes a giant dynamo. And what then happens is because there's no rubbing, the rotor, which is inside the motor, pushes an electric current around the motor rather than trying to catch up and take the electric current. It pushes it in. The car can then apply resistance, and that then slows the car down because the wheels are basically pushing a giant dynamo. I'm trying to think of something like a wind-up torch, right? But like a really, really strong wind-up torch is what the wheels are pushing against. And of course, they don't tend to lock, right? They will always be spinning. They're pushing against this electric force. They should be good all the way. We absolutely recommend that if you're thinking about this, try it nice and easily first. The other thing to point out on this, and I did this when I was testing a couple of electric vans for a couple of companies, is that your brake lights do light up on the back of the car when you go into full regen. So if you go into full regen, try not to use the brake. The car should slow down by itself using that regenerative energy and pushing it back into the batteries. And that's going to keep you really safe. It's also going to keep your range really lovely and high. However, on some cars, mainly German cars, Porsche have a white paper on it. The Porsche Taycan, the regenerative braking is done on the brake pedal, not on the throttle pedal. So those Porsche drivers that are out there, your Audi e-tron GT drivers that are out there, you're going to just have to have a much nicer touch on your brake pedal when you're slowing down. But just keep a wee eye out on that. That's just in case you've got one of those cars, you need to be aware. Now, there's not much else to the driving aspects that I would really have a wee think about. I think if you can try and drive in light conditions, that's all good. Try and avoid rain. I mean, I'm saying that as a Scottish person who lives on the West Coast. It's not going to be possible, but those things can make a difference to your car and can make a difference in the cold weather. As I said, I think we all think of cold weather driving as the real snowy stuff. But actually, that kind of driving is reserved for the real specialists. We really rarely see proper snowy driving unless you're further north than me. But those cold, sleety, horrible days where you get cold hands and cold bones, no matter what you do, those are the days that we want to make sure that your cars are heated up and all good. Finally, I wanted to bring up some information that you might get when you're down having a coffee at family dinner or down at the pub with friends. That, some people say, I never want to be stuck in an electric car if I'm stuck on the road for, let's say, 8 hours because there's an accident up in front of me. This is a nightmare scenario, and I do understand that people worry about this. However, um, uh, Ford were deeply worried about this when they launched the Mustang Mach-E in the States. So they ran a Mustang Mach-E with no movement against, if I remember correctly, it was an F-150, so the pickup. And over the course of a day and a half of running everything to stay hot, the Mach-E lost in the region of 45 to 55%. The F-150 went through nearly a whole tank of fuel. So just bear in mind, it's not going to be that if you get stuck on the motorway, you're then going to be stuck there for 24 hours when somebody has to come and get you. If you're stuck for a few hours, get the heating on, keep yourself nice and warm. You just might have to do a couple of extra charges to get home. But that's what the Electroverse is there to help you with. Now, that's us cracked on through. We've done our half hour of chat. Hopefully that's got some questions, got your whetted your appetite a little bit. There's a delay between me talking and the YouTube live. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the YouTube live, run through some of the questions, and hopefully we'll get some answers for you, which should be all good. What I am going to do is leave the presentation for us so you just see me, and then we'll be all good. So let's have a quick read of some of these then. So what do we have? We had some questions up here regarding. So we had a question here about extra traction in the snow, Daniel. Can one winter mode? So Tim, winter mode, what it's going to do is it's going to pull more energy, or it's going to pull. It's going to heat sink better, so it's going to divert some of the heat of things, and it's not going to try and cool the batteries down using its onboard system. So that's one of the big things that winter mode does. What it'll also do is probably change your throttle response. So your accelerator pedal is going to change in terms of like how much power you get when you press on it in certain ways. That's so that your car doesn't accelerate out and spin the wheels too much. And that comes on to then Daniel's question as well. Next part, Simon. If that's a good enough answer for me, Tim, let me know. Drop me an email or have a little chat. That's absolutely fine. Simon, does my EV have a small 12-volt battery, and what is it used for? Yes, nearly every single EV, in fact, every single EV that Octopus Electric Vehicles provides does have a small 12-volt battery. Now, what that will be doing is running things like all the auxiliary power, like your ignition would in your petrol car. All right. So what you'll find there is you'll have a whole load of stuff that does that. So that will be your radio, your window wipers, your lights as well. But just like your petrol car, that will heat back up when you're using, not heat back up, that will charge back up when you are running around using the alternator. So it doesn't have an alternator, but it basically has the same as an alternator. So you're all good. Consensus is, from Daniel, consensus is that EVs will be better in the snow due to the extra traction provided. Tires are what gives you traction. So I want to caveat this. Yes, absolutely. The electric vehicle does work a little bit better in the snow. That's not because the traction is better. They are a little bit heavier. The weight's a little bit better. However, it's that motor can spin up and slow down much faster. What also an electric motor can do is it can have a force applied to it by the computer to slow it down. So in certain situations, I'm trying to explain how that works. Mercedes call it negative torque. But if we think about a petrol engine, it sucks in its fresh air and fuel, it then lights it. And when it lights it, that's a runaway reaction now. It has to go through the engine, push the pistons. And if you've pressed the throttle too hard, that power has to go somewhere. With an electric car, we can stop it almost instantly. It's the same difference between having, let's say, 1,000 candles and a dimmer switch. If you think how long it would take you to light and blow out a set of candles, think how long it would take you to change the lighting on a dimmer switch. That's why an electric vehicle works better in the snow. Is because the car can make differences to it. Can go, oh, Daniel wants this amount of power, but that amount of power isn't going to give him traction. So we're going to reduce the power to the last time we had traction, and it can do that almost instantly. Whereas your petrol car can't do that. Hopefully that makes sense. And then coming on to Haydoc's question, so those rear wheel drive cars in the snow won't have the same impact as their petrol car counterparts, because the car can predict that. It can predict the wheel spin, and it can start to factor in. If you do have the ability to fit winter tires, please do. We're having a look into it at work. I've spoken to a couple of the guys, Ben, to try and work out what we can do and how we would make that work for you. It's not something that we can store or do anything with, but if you do have the space, if you've got a garage and you can get some winter tires, they are some of the best things. Most cars should come with all-round tires on them anyway. I run with Pirelli P0s, but they are like the proper wet weather performance tire on my BMW. I would also have a look at the new Cross Climate stuff. That's a very, very clever tire from Michelin, Hankook. I think nearly everybody has a Cross Climate now. It looks weird though. It looks like it's like this. I can't really describe it, but hopefully that works. Ashes says that would explain why there's much power in the back. Yep, absolutely. Suran, hopefully I've said your name correctly. Where do I find these tabs? I don't think I've found them. So you should have a pack in the back of your car, which you open and shut. So it's like a flat that you, it's a big long one at the moment. It says Octopus Electric Vehicles on the top of it. If you've not had that, let us know. You should do. You should get that in every single car. I see Tarek, Daniel, David, and David all saying it as well. Yeah, there should be a big black box. It's about this long by that. And in there, if you unzip it, there should be some tabs in there. There's also maybe a sponge. There should be your driver number, which is your driver line. There should be, we're changing it, so it's getting a little bit complicated trying to remember, but also you should have a yellow high-vis, fluoro high-vis vest in there. But what I will do is, if you don't, drop me an email. So if you reply to the Eventbrite, I'll then either show you what it looks like in my car, but also I'll double check what's going on there and make sure we get that for you. All right. Kofo asks, is it true that charging your car to 100% isn't good for the battery life, and we should be charging it to 80 and then letting it drop to 20 before charging it back up? Does this apply to winter too? So, for that, I would say day to day, absolutely charging to 80, 85% is always going to keep your car in good nick. If you're regularly charging at home and can charge up to 85%, don't worry about running the battery out. The car's going to do that for you. It's going to work out where the energy needs to go. Only charge to 100% when you're going on a long journey. But if you are then going on a long journey, don't worry about taking it below 20%, because actually you're going to be running lots and lots and lots and lots and lots. There's some literature out there about keeping your battery between 20 and 30%, 20 and 80%. However, the car, if you're charging day to day, the car will do an awful lot of that for you, and you don't need to worry about it. Colin, I see what's Electroverse. And I see David's answered that as well, so we're all good there. But I will. There should be more stuff on our website. You can also check it out online to get that sorted. And also the other webinar that we did in the past, we'll get that sorted. Tarek, I can't find some Tesla fast chargers on Electroverse. Additionally, is there any truth that I heard that my Tesla should be free in the first year? Charging should be free in the first year. There is some truth in it. But that truth was a long time ago. When I was at Tesla back a decade ago, we offered free charging for life on Model S, and Tesla have rolled back different things as they've expanded as a business. So absolutely, you've probably heard it, but no, you will not get free charging on a Model 3 or a Model Y for the first year. You're absolutely right. You won't. You can find Tesla chargers on Electroverse, but Electroverse will always route by the chargers that you can pay. It will always prefer to route via chargers that you pay for on the Electroverse because it knows you'll have a card for them. But you can also use your Tesla app, the Tesla Navigate app. If you go to the top, type in where you want to go. It will also do the same thing as the Electroverse, but only using the Tesla system. So that's why. Kevin asks, why are fast chargers so expensive? It's a brilliant question. The reason that rapid chargers are more expensive is because you're paying for the unit as well. So you're not just paying for the electricity, you're actually paying for the service. And for it's like fuel at service stations, but turned up more, not turned up in terms of it costs more, but in terms of the percentage of what it's like at home through to what. So you're also having to speed the charging up. You've got a very hot unit that you have to cool down. And each of those units is a very, very expensive unit. So if you turn up at like an Ionity or a Fastned, they have sunk significant cost into that. Kevin, however, I would say if you've got a specific car, let us know. We can see where that is. And also on the Electroverse, if you're also on Intelligent Octopus Go, you will get a reduction in cost at some of those rapid chargers as well. There we go. Sport exercises ask, using cruise control on long journeys more efficient? Yes and no. So I drove, as I said, I drove from London to Largs, which is near Glasgow last night. I used cruise control on most of the journey and the way up a hill. But when I was at the top of a hill, if it was steep enough, I'd cancel the cruise and let the car freewheel down. The reason being that the cruise control won't tend to know what's coming next unless it's really, really clever. And in that sense, it won't know if the hill is bottoming out and give you a little bit of extra speed, or what it might try and do is slow you down when actually you don't want to slow down. You want to carry a little bit more because you're about to come from a 60 into a 70. So I use cruise control to stay at a speed, and then I turn it off when I'm on the hill to roll down. Hopefully that makes sense. Ash says, spent 2.5 hours in this scenario, used 3% more. Fantastic. That's good. It's all good. Is Electroverse available as an app on the car or on CarPlay? It is on CarPlay. If you download it to your phone, you can then absolutely use it on your, you'll be able to use it on your sat nav, on your infotainment screen and whatnot through Apple CarPlay. Richard asks, what is the best mode for driving your Tesla rear-wheel drive in the snow? I would absolutely suggest having Regen turned on and chill mode turned on too. That will make the throttle travel, or the amount of power you get, will be longer through the travel of the throttle, so you'll have more ability to control what's going on there, which is good there. JP says, living in a rural location without gritted roads, I've always used all-season tyres up until now with Octopus. Be very interesting to hear if the lease could include changing. Yeah, it would be amazing. I don't know what statement I wasn't too true on, but what I would say is that from when I spent some time with race cars, we had some proper summer tires that wouldn't operate below 7 degrees. Definitely my P zeros operate down to -7, -8, and below. But you can absolutely drop me a wee email. I can help on that. But yeah, all season winter tires are the way to go. We just need to work out how to get that the proper way as well. Laura, drop us an email because that isn't Laura, you need to drop us an email because that shouldn't be happening. I don't know what's going on there. That's not something we're good. Cool. Mark, David, Mark, drop me a wee email and I can get that sorted for you. David, absolutely drop me another wee email about your hours. I'll see what's going on there and work out what's happening there. Brilliant again from Philip. Sorry, I don't think I heard the answer. Is it fine to charge the Audi Q8 every day? I don't have a home charger, so I use lampposts. Yes, absolutely. Just make sure you're charging to 85%. So go into your car settings on your app or on the car, set it at 85%, and then you're all good to go on that. You'll be fine. Thank you, Haydock. Drop us a wee email if you need anything. What mode for Fiat 500? Now you're asking me. I have not spent an awful lot of time in the new Fiat 500e. I would say, if I remember, it goes park, reverse, neutral, drive on the bar across. So I'd go into drive, and then I would drop it down into Sherpa, I think it's called, Laura. So you'll have 3 modes. I think you have normal, range, and Sherpa. I would pop it into Sherpa for the best traction, but that might reduce some of the heating situations, and especially if you've got one of those drop top ones. It's a Fiat. It's not built for cold weather. Or it wasn't designed with cold weather in mind in terms of keeping you warm. You look great in them, but I would maybe keep it in range just so you get some heat in there and you're all good. Folks, thank you ever so much for joining. I've come to the end of the questions. If there are more questions that appear, we'll go through them over the weekend and start looking to get some answers written into the chat panel as time goes on. I'll have a look at them tomorrow as well. We'll also do a little bit of editing, try and take away that 2 minutes at the beginning of us saying the stream was starting to help you get sorted, and then we're all good to go from there. Thank you ever so much for joining. We look forward to speaking to you again soon. Any questions, please do get in touch. You can drop an email to us there. We'd also love, if you guys are comfortable with it, we'd love to send you a little email to find out what things you would like to learn in a webinar, because obviously we sit here and we talk about the things that I think would affect us. And we spoke to some customers the beginning of the year and we asked them, hey, what are you struggling with your car? And that's where the Electroverse webinar and the cold winter driving webinar have come from. However, if you drop us a little email, we will then maybe create some form of form where you can tell us what you would like to hear from us next, and we can start getting on that. So as I said, thank you ever so much for joining. Keep your eye out for webinars in the future, and we'd love to hear what you think we should be doing. Thank you so much.